Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Just introducing our main stage sponsor for today, Red Olive. Providing a presentation is Jefferson Lynch, Managing Director of Red Olive, as well as Barry McNulty, Director of Analytics at Hyde Group. They'll be providing a presentation entitled Data as a Driver for Improving Performance. Just to remind everyone again that there is the Q&A chat box available at the bottom. Please submit your questions at any point during the course of the presentation, and they'll hopefully be answered at the end, as well as the fact that after the session, if you do have any further questions, please go ahead to the Red Olive booth, where you'll be able to network and see a variety of resources. So I'll just hand over now to both Barry and Jefferson, and thank you very much for viewing.
Thank you. Well, everybody should have somewhere safe to call home. I'm sure there's no one in the audience who would disagree with that sentiment. And even the headline advertising for this conference led with references to the Addison Act of 1919, in which the government at the time attempted to start providing affordable and decent homes for the heroes, really, coming back from World War I as veterans. Well, as you can probably see from the row of terraces shown on the picture on the left-hand side there, housing's changed quite a bit in the 100 years or so since Christopher Addison's time. But it's still a universally held view that everybody should have somewhere safe to call home. So why is it that about 100 years on, we still have homelessness? Why is it that we still find it so difficult to provide decent and affordable homes? Why is it that even with so many modern techniques, methodologies, technologies available, we still struggle with this age-old problem? And it's actually very topical. So within the last week, this is a picture taken from the BBC News website. I'm sure everyone, or many of you will be aware that elections have been taking place within the last week or so. One of the most hotly contested areas was how candidates would tackle the housing crisis, particularly in and around London. For the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to be focusing on how one of those more modern tool sets can be used to address the housing crisis. And those are the tools of analytics and data. My name's Jefferson Lynch. I'm the managing director of a company called Red Olive. We're an analytics and data consultancy, and we've been partnering with property and tenancy organisations for quite a number of years now. And I must say, I am delighted today to be joined by Barry McNulty, who's director of analytics at one of our clients at the Hyde Group. So Hyde are one of the largest providers of social housing in the country, and are also widely recognised as being a leading light in the use of an application of data and analytics to help vulnerable people. Hyde work closely with organisations such as HACT and OSCAR on establishing data standards that are reusable within the sector as a whole. And Barry personally has a wealth of experience using analytics to provide better services to his customers. Here's what we're going to be covering. Barry's going to start by outlining to you what he sees as some of the biggest challenges facing Hyde today, and some of the ways that he and his team, with some support from Red Olive, have been working together to help to address those. And then for the final 5 minutes, what we'll do is Barry will hand back to me, and then we'll consider what some of these topics might mean for you, what help would be available to you, and also I hope I'm going to be mentioning a free seminar that we'll be running in June, which goes into more depth on some of these topics, and I hope that will be of interest to you too. But right now, I'm going to hand over to Barry.
Thanks, Jefferson. I'm just going to get myself together in terms of the technology. Here we go. So you should be able to see a presentation that gives you an outline of the Hyde Group in numbers there. Okay, we've got loads to get through and not much time. So I'm going to absolutely rattle through the slides that I've got. Really happy to be here today. What I'm going to take you through are some external factors that have influenced our increased concentration on data management. I'll do the same for internal factors that have done the same thing around data management. I'll talk a little bit on data strategy, data architecture, and data standards. And then we'll finish off with how all of those things have influenced the way that we're doing performance management at Hyde. So just some headline numbers in terms of Hyde. We started in the 60s. Our founders were inspired to tackle homelessness in their area. So their original vision was to help people excluded from the mainstream market by providing them with decent, affordable homes and managing them properly. So that message, that vision still holds true today. So it's very much one of the aims of our organisation to continue to have that vision to support as many people as we can. Won't go through the numbers bit by bit. Around about 50,000 homes, over 100,000 customers, just over 1,000 staff, and we're spread across London and the Southeast in the main. Okay, so I'll move on to next slide. All right, external environment. So these aren't all of the challenges that we're facing at the moment, but certainly some of the key ones. So I shall rattle through each area just to give you an overview of why these things have influenced our approach to data management and data. So building safety. There's a couple of aspects around building safety. It's not necessarily just about the overhaul of the regulations that we all know so much about over the last few years. Within that, we know that there's a stronger role for residents. So part of that stronger role is that they have a greater degree of entitlement to core information about building safety, which is great. And they've also got the right to request more detail as appropriate, which absolutely is where it should be. There should be a degree of transparency around this. So important aspect that we need to be able to reflect on as a sector. Housing associations also need to consider other aspects around the regulatory changes. So there's a development of the building safety case, there's a gateway point system that we need to reflect against, and there's also how we're all going to manage this golden thread of information across our buildings. I think one of the key areas for me around building safety is it's vital that right at the start of the life cycle of a property and the data associated with the property that we get it right. So for example, when we have development handovers, so when we complete a development and we hand it over into other parts of the business to run services off them, then we should have our best and full view of data at that time. If we've got full knowledge and understanding of all aspects of property data at that time, any conversations around safety become much easier. So there's more that we can do with that data if we've got access to it and we properly define it, including data that is described as unstructured. So that's data that, for example, sits inside things like PDFs. Really important. Housing crisis. There's lots and lots to say about this. Just some key stats, really. There's a visualization on the right-hand side that shows just some very basic facts. Population's rising, we know that. There's an estimate around where we expect to be in terms of our population for the UK into the early 2020s there. But we can also see the number of completions that we've had, housing completions since the late 60s. It's very obvious where we're going. You know, there's been a drop over that period of time. We're struggling to build as many homes as we think we need. There's research, and I think the most recent research suggests that we should be building 340,000, completing 340,000 homes a year. The government itself has a target around 300,000 homes by the mid-2020s. We're quite a bit off that. So, you know, what are we going to do in order to make sure that we fill that gap? It's not just about those homes, it's about the rents inside those homes. So we know if there's a high private sector rent attached to that, it's going to make it much more difficult for people to actually buy those homes that are so important as well. If we talk about the rent, the typical rent on a two-bed property in England, for example, at £675 a month, in London that's £1,500. You know, what is their ability to actually save their earnings in order to put a deposit down on a mortgage, for example? We know that an average couple in a private tenancy pays 41% of their income on rent. If you compare that to how much homeowners pay, it's 18%. social tenants, 30%. So you can see the differences between them there. All of this data is available via the English Housing Survey on MCHLG, by the way. Talking about private renters again, most of them are on short hold tenancies as well. So this means that they can be given notice of 2 months. Now, how secure does that feel for the 5 million households who are renting from a private landlord at the moment as well? There's a degree of uncertainty about their future there. Regardless of government targets, regardless of where we are on the moment, I think we need to do as much as we can in the sector to make every home that we've got count, and then also to do whatever we can to build those new homes as well, because they are so important to give everyone a safe and affordable home to live in. Carbon targets, we know we've got some clear carbon targets that expect us to get to, I think it's a minimum of energy performance certificate band C by 2030. Okay, that's great, and absolutely would be supported by I think most of us. However, what do we understand about what it's going to take for us to actually get our stock portfolios up to that level? What kind of changes are we going to need to make in order to support that? What are the costs associated with all of that as well? Because, you know, if we're spending money over here, then we're less able to do some of the things that we might want to do around development, for example. So really important. Modernization. So from a technology perspective, the way that we use technology outside work, the way that our residents use technology, there's a degree of expectation about how they interact with applications, for example. Why wouldn't we want to make it as easy as possible for those residents to interact in the same way in our own working environments? That's for the residents, but also for our staff as well. Having that seamless way of operating is something that we need to reflect against. All of us in the sector have either gone through or going through or have gone through or about to go through some level of digital change or a digital program. They're all called slightly different things, but it's about modernization ultimately. And all of us need to decide exactly how far we go. What I do know is that if you understand your data, it gives you way more options in terms of the tools that you use to run your business, because you're better able to take that data and migrate it elsewhere in order to take advantages of improvements that you've got around technology and new approaches and applications as well. Regulatory environment, again, it's a challenge. It's been there for obviously for a long time, so there's nothing new about this, but the regulator needs information in order to undertake its functions. How we're rated by the regulator isn't just important in terms of our proof of governance of viability, but it also links to the degree to which we're able to borrow in order to be able to develop more homes. So it's really, really vital for a number of reasons that we get that right. We must supply accurate data to the regulator, and we must do that in a way that's as easy and efficient as possible, because the submission process is not straightforward. There's some complexities with the way that we present data back to the regulator, and there's some grey areas around that data as well. So let's make it as easy as possible to do that. It's a factor that we need to consider. There's also the Housing Ombudsman to consider here. So we know that changes have been made that are expected to improve awareness, accessibility, and speed of complaint resolution. The Ombudsman has been enabled to be more proactive on systemic issues, and it's broadened its basis on which it can refer cases to the regulator as well. So again, we must be able to respond with accurate and timely data, and we want to do that in a way that makes the whole process as efficient as possible. So there's some of the external challenges that we've got. There's a common thread across all of them. You need better control and access to your data in order to be able to face some of those challenges. I'll talk for a little bit now about what we're doing in terms of our internal environment as well. Okay, this first area, it's not DQ, it's me yet. It's a terrible pun, but it's a good way to also describe the degree, the level of sophistication that we've had around the conversation on data over the last few years. So I'm talking specifically about the Hyde Group here. So we would have, I would have those conversations with people in the lift where, you know, you'd be wringing your hands. What are we going to do about our data quality? It's terrible. It's, you know, it's holding us back. It's not just about the data quality. It doesn't get bad on its own. It's likely that the root cause is going to be associated with a people, a process, or a technology issue in some shape or form. So if you don't address that, you're not going to get your data fixed, you're not going to get your data right. So it needs to be addressed. And there's many more aspects to data quality. The spread of expertise. So we at Hyde had our data and information type people spread across a number of different places. They weren't necessarily all aligned, and they're working in slightly different role profiles, despite the fact that we're doing the same thing. It wasn't a brilliant use of resources, and we needed to do something about that to make sure that everyone was focused in the right areas and the priority areas as well. We had a lack of ownership. It wasn't always clear who actually owned our data. So if you want to be able to get some traction around, fixing something or improving it, then you are going to have to know who's got most skin in the game when it comes to that data. So who, for example, owns the process that data has records created inside, for example, if you're going to get traction around improvements, really important. Cost association side, I don't think it's well understood, the cost associated with poor data management. There's quite a bit of research around this in terms of the average amount of time that staff will spend on reconciling data, integrating data manually. I think I've seen some areas it's 25% of overall time is spent on these activities. It's got a cost attached to it. So if we're smarter about the management of data, we're smarter about the way to improve it. And then there's accountability. So it's very, very similar to the lack of ownership I mentioned previously, but accountability for specific areas around data management. So who owns our approach to master data management? Who owns our approach to things like business intelligence, document management, data governance, information governance, really important areas. So what helped us get organized? Data strategy. The visualization on the right-hand side is a really helpful way to look at all aspects of what you need to consider inside a data strategy. For us, it was about providing a clear approach on how we're going to best use, manage, control our data, obviously supported by a clear plan as to how we're going to get there as well. We had a supporting program in order to deliver that roadmap, but it was really vital to really explain clearly what we were going to do. One very important aspect around your data strategy is there's got to be a reason why you're doing it. It's the so what. I love to talk about it. It's very close to my heart, data, but actually, what on earth is the reason why we would do all of these things? So your sales pitch is vital. So the corporate drivers, as they're described in here, are the reason why you'll have that program, you'll have that data strategy. So what is the thing that we're going to get to that we need to make sure that we've got a better handle around our data on. Benefits attached to that, you've got a vehicle that everyone can get behind. It's going to cover all aspects of your bases around data, not just choose a specific area. And it gives you an overall purpose, as well as getting your exec support, which is absolutely vital for these things as well. Really important aspect of our data strategy was data architecture. So the visualization that you can see here is an early draft of what our business data model looks like at Hyde. So we've got some information groups: property, customer, people, party, etc. And then within those information groups, we've got some data entities. The data entities are a way to put a bracket around a particular type of data. Why did we do this? Well, if we can classify all of our data, so what format it should be in, where it's mastered, how it's maintained, how it's updated, it gives us the ability to have an understanding around how exactly that data is managed across its lifespan and where it is. When we first started looking at this, we were lucky in that the Hacked OSCAR Data Standards project was in its infancy at the time. Really heavily, we're big supporters of that project and will continue to be, but we were also doing our own data architecture internally as well. So it was brilliant because we had somewhere to check our homework against. So that was really helpful. Also, our model links back to those sector standards, so that whenever we're working with organizations who meet those standards, it's going to be easier for us to communicate from a data perspective. Another important dimension from our new data management approach was performance management. So there was nothing actually wrong with our approach to performance management per se. It ticked a lot of the boxes in terms of what you would normally expect of a performance management approach. You've got your pyramid of KPIs and your supporting PIs underneath those. All links back to strategic objectives. Everything was kind of clearly owned. Nothing really fundamentally wrong, but we did have some challenges around it. So how the metrics were presented was an important point because different tools were being used. There wasn't a sole combined source of data. It was too easy to focus on questioning the validity of metric rather than take action on it. There were too many metrics, and it wasn't necessarily easy to query and interact either. So what did we do? We put together a new approach around a procedure for performance management to tighten things up a little bit. We looked at better definitions attached to the metrics. We looked at the metrics themselves. And we wanted to look at better visibility around ownership and all aspects of the metadata associated with the metrics, so the data associated with the data. And we wanted to visualize this through Power BI and connect it to our data warehouse. And this is where Red Olive really came in and helped us kind of bring this new approach to life. So the visualizations that you can see here show just a couple of examples of a very, very early draft. There's no real data in here, by the way, either, of how we visualize this. So just really, really quick, sort of conscious of time a little bit here. Apologies, Jefferson, but really, really quick run through. Top level, you've got a scorecard that is focused on our exec team, but is also available to whoever we grant permissions to it. So senior leadership team, for example, that covers the metrics that we will look at on a operational monthly basis. And you can see that there's a different dashboard split on the area of interest. Each tile, each square here is a metric in its own right, and it's got a target, sorry, outturn performance, a target, and a description, as well as the actual performance over a period of time. So you can see at a glance how we're getting on. If you go into the information bar there, it gives you extra information on the drill through. So you can talk about your clear definition attached to the metric, how you've been performing over a period of time, where you are in a year-to-date perspective, commentary associated with that metric, who owns it, what level of provenance it's got against it. This is all stuff that's self-serve as well. This is all stuff that's to hand for those who need it. Benefits associated with that. We've got a quicker turnaround of production. We've got a much easier conversation at exec and leadership team meetings around performance because it's all to hand. People are focusing on what the data is telling them as opposed to, questioning whether the definitions are correct or anything like that, because it's all to hand, which is exactly where we want people to be. What action are we going to take based on what the performance is telling us? What's next for us? We've got loads more to do around a modernization program. Part of that is going to be data streaming. Part of that is improving things like the way that we do performance management. More focus around automation. I'm going to leave it there, run slightly over time. Jefferson, back over to you.
Thank you. Stop. I'll share screen. Great, thank you. Okay, good. So I think what you've got a taste for there, or a little taste of, is there's a heck of a lot of work that's gone in there. Now, and as I said at the start, I think Hyde are one of the largest and most well-equipped housing providers in the country. So you may well be sitting there thinking, well, that all sounds amazing if you're of the scale of a Hyde, if you're managing 50,000 homes, but maybe you're smaller, maybe you've got 5,000 or 1,000, what can you do? Well, if that is the position you're in and you're thinking you need some help, please, can I just encourage you, please just do come over to the Red Olive stand today and have a conversation with us. Whether you're looking to focus on building safety, Internet of Things, you want to improve the risk management you've got around your rent arrears, or Barry touched a bit on things like the statistical data return. Red Olive has a set of accelerators. So things that can get you there quicker, which mean you're not having to hire extra people internally or build things from scratch. Just going to move on quickly. I'm conscious of the time. So what I hope we've been able to get across in the 20-25 minutes is some of the ways that analytics and data really can make a difference, a frontline difference to addressing the housing crisis. So to come right back to where we started, lots has changed in housing in the 100 years or so since the Addison Act. some of the photos here on the right-hand side are some of the very recent developments that Hyde Housing have been involved in. And I hope you'll agree, I think they look amazing and very different from what we saw there, some of the photos from 100 years ago. If you want to find out more about some of the topics that have been covered here, let's agree now we're going to go over to the Red Olive stand. And please do come and join us. You're welcome to ask some questions of Barry. Also, again, we're going to be running a follow-on free seminar in June, covering looking at some of these topics in more depth. So please do come over and you can register your interest there as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.